So thank you, Deanne and Kathy. And they just kind of skipped over it. That first place queso fresco at ACS, that is a huge deal. And as you saw many of their pictures, like them, I think many of your family vacations turn into cheese adventures. So be ready for that. And they also reminded me of something Becca said with the data and the local foods movement maybe plateauing. Not that Becca's wrong, but that data is nationwide, I believe. And so Minnesota might be a little behind that and might be, just catching up. So data is just data. But now I want to turn it over to Jeff, and with his wife Marianne and family, they run. I'll let you say the whole name. Metz's Dairy and Honey and Creamery and Milk. And Jeff is also this year's or last year's 2018's Minnesota Milk Dairy Producer of the Year. So, as Executive Director of Minnesota Milk, I got to tell him that news. Very proud of that. And the Adi family was the Minnesota Milk Producers of the Year just last year, 2 years ago. Thank you. Small world, but Jeff, I'll turn it over to you. You can either put this on so your hands are free, or you can hold it like this. Either way.
Hi, again, I'm Jeff Metz. This all started with a family meeting. We've got kids that want to be a part of our dairy operation. We were looking at expansion. One of the things that I always thought of after 30 years of dairying is the idea of putting our name on a label and making a product of our own. And we had a family meeting with the kids, and they were all pretty excited about it. And that's kind of the path we took. Our planning started in about 2008, 2009. We started making cheese in July of 2014. So we'll be celebrating our first 5-year anniversary mark, kind of a big milestone for us. So again, I'm going to probably reiterate some of the stuff that Cannonbell said, but again, we started planning 2008, 2009, making our first batch of cheese 2014. The first thing we did was when we started talking about this, first thing we did is call our state people. We got the inspectors on board and started the planning there. This is a double 12 parlor where we milk our cows. And after 28 blueprints, this is our creamery. So again, the planning, I drove our contractor nuts. This is where our parlor is. This center part was remodeled a little bit. That was originally when I started. We had a 40 cow tie stall barn. So we've grown quite a bit. We used an HSTS pasteurizer, so high temp, short time. So these were some pictures we just took, had everything set up. We had before we started the actual cheese process, we had an open house for all of our local community members, a lot of the people that helped us out, neighbors, just to see what kind of crazy stuff Jeff Metz was into. Now it's actually, to be honest with you, value added. I'm sure Lucas went through the same thing. When I started talking about this, people really look at you funny. And now all of a sudden they're starting to appreciate it a little more. I think so. It's coming around. These are some slides we pulled, but we got 3 generations in there packaging cheese curds in our plant. So we have the one area where we saw the pasteurizer. That's our make area. Then we have a whole nother room that's our packaging area. Behind here, I said we also have honey. We also do honey processing. We got a bottling plant. It consists of about a 10 by 12 room. A little 25. Everybody thinks, how big is this operation? Well, no, it's pretty small for what we do there. Again, we make some flavored cheddars. We do hand-pulled string cheese. We started about a little over a year ago. And we do cheese curds. We've got about 13 different flavors of cheese curds. So that's kind of been our cheese curds were our niche. Again, we use the same consultant, Jim Gage. He's one of those people that he's not afraid to tell you your shirt's ugly today. He will be in he's a great guy. I mean, he's gonna, and he's great because it's tough love type thing, but he really is helpful. So that's where I think we probably disagree a little bit with Becca. If you can find the right person, it is going to be huge for you. And when we started the planning process, after we got going here, we actually toured. That's going to be important for people. One of the things we did is we hopped in the car, my wife and I, we planned out a map. We looked at different states where people were doing value added. We went to Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. The first place, here's my warning. First place we went to in Iowa, the guy said, hey, you can do this yourself. Learn how to weld. I go on eBay, I buy the equipment, all this other stuff, okay? He's no longer in business. And I bet you Todd he knows maybe who I'm talking about. I won't say any names, but There was a lot of issues. We went into his plant. You would slip on the floor. You had to walk like you were 100 years old because they did nothing with the floor. He said, I did the floor myself. They were making butter. There's butter splattering everywhere. He's slipping. I walked up through the area where they were doing ice cream. There was water dripping out of the light fixtures. So get on board with your state people. Get on board with a really good contractor. One thing in our area is Wisconsin has a lot of cheese plants, processing plants. Minnesota doesn't. So you're going to have to find people who are familiar with food safety, food processing, things like that. The other thing we did too along the line of food safety is I attended 2 different conferences on food safety before we got going very far. There were some really good ones at the time. We were fortunate. Went to food safety instruction at River Falls, and there's also a short one-day short course down in Iowa that I went to. Then I went also to cheese making in Madison, so we had some really good people. This is kind of an overview of our farm. As I'm going to bounce around a lot, but marketing, when you go forward, if you jump into this, is going to be huge. You're going to have to decide who's going to do the marketing and who's going to do the manufacturing and who's going to take care of the cows if you go that route. We have everything involved here, cheese making. We get out, you do a lot of store demos. You're going to have to allow for sampling. That's going to be huge for you. That's just a picture of a whole family. You know, we have family involvement, and throw some quick slides. You can have Facebook. Cannonbell's mentioned Facebook. Again, you're going to be, that's one thing you're going to have to realize. Dairy farming, when you're just selling commodity milk, somebody else has got their label out there and their name on it. You're in the background. When you do value added, you're now in the forefront. You're now going to be held accountable if something tastes bad or whatever. However, that local thing is huge again as far as people like to meet, you know, the family. When we're out there sampling, my wife and I say, well, yeah, the kids are taking care of the cows and the crops. You know, my husband and I, we take care of the cheese plant. People really are intrigued by that. So there's still opportunity out there. The other thing I would encourage is I just read, you get a whole host of new information coming into you. I get a Cheese Reporter magazine. Yesterday I was reading a little bit. Kerrygold out of Ireland is making a big push on their butter. There's no reason why in Minnesota we can't figure out how to make that same butter. And that's what I would encourage anybody that's looking at value added. We did that feasibility study. We drew a circle, 60-mile circle around our home place, and I went out to 36 different grocery stores looking at the dairy case, just like they said, and we looked at what was there and what was missing. Fresh cheese curds weren't there at the time, and that's where Jim, our consultant, said this is what would be good. So if you find a good business person, they can help you with that and say this and identify that's familiar with the dairy case, what's being made out there, and find those things. You know, I would encourage people to look in the cases, the different things. Is there something we're importing right now? Not to go into politics or anything, but if there's something that we can do locally, there's no reason why, you know, that shouldn't be able to be made right here. The other thing is understanding competition. So if you've got 4 people within 20 miles and you're all going to do bottled milk, you're going to really butt heads bad, and you're going to set yourself all up for failure. I think there's times Lucas, they have their product. How far are you north of this Twin Cities? Or 2 hours. There's times we actually, to be honest, we've got our product in the same case. So you have to understand that what works out great is Lucas is 10 miles down the road. They're doing cheese. Deanne's another 10 miles down the road. She's bottling milk, and I'm doing butter. We're all going to get together and let's get that all in the same truck. So you really got to start to think, how can, you know, value added, you want to be working together as a group and not try to kick each other out of the, you know, place. Coming back to that feasibility study and everything else, one of the things that I learned when we were in Illinois touring and all that, I met 2 producers down there, great operations. They are still going to this day. However, when they started this, their milk processor said, we're not taking your milk anymore. So the one was selling his milk for, their family was selling their milk to a calf grower for $5 a hundred for about 2 months before they got things up and running. And the other one, I guess they were just dumping it until they got their plant up and running. The other thing, tell you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes, there's a lot of opportunity out there. We went back to one of those places this last summer when we were visiting relatives in Illinois. These folks were bottling milk. They've got some other products. They do a great job. and I really looked at them. They were like a stellar operation in my eyes. They really had their act together when we toured their place in 2012. Wanted to go back, see how they're doing. We have some other products we're looking at doing. They do a lot of bottled milk. They were getting beat up really bad because Aldi's and Walmart were in a milk war, selling milk for 70 cents a gallon on the store shelf, and they're set their milk for $4 a gallon. They said it was tough, but they were getting through it. They were able to switch up. They were not too far from a Chicago market, so they switched over to some coffee creamers, got a lot more. He said they were dumping skim milk, but they said the coffee creamer thing was helping them along. So there's some of those things you have to be prepared for in your in going forward. Um, some acronyms: SMIF, Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. That's important help to us. As they said, I'm going to repeat some of these. CETA, Community Economic Development Association. They were another one. Small Business Development Center. They're another one. DEED, your local EDAs. Those are all places. One of the things I learned is that when you go from being a dairy producer to looking at value added, you have now gone from agriculture to commercial in several different eyes. So if you want to throw a real loop in your county's tax codes, just build a non-farm creamery next to your dairy barn, and they're going to be scratching their head for a long time on how they're going to tax you. And they will figure out a way. I found that out quick. One of the things you have food safety is huge. So there's a lot of rules. FSMA is going to be important that you learn the food safety part. Even label, there's rules for that. Keeping track of everything you do in the plant, having what's called a HACCP plan, you're going to need that. Grants, state has been super. We talked to people in Iowa and Wisconsin, and our Minnesota Department of Ag is actually looked upon greatly because of what they've done for value-added agriculture with their grant programs. Check with your rural development office. There's grants for the feasibility studies if you choose to go that route, and maybe talk to them about who they've seen as being successful, if they're willing to release that, or they can release that name of people that have worked with grant writers or doing some of this research. Who could help you out. Going through my notes, quality controls. I guess one of the things you have to think about is who your customer is going to be. If you're going to choose a product, who's that customer? What are they going to look like? How will you distribute? We do self-distribution. We understand that when you start working with a distributor, there's some great ones, and then there's some not so great ones. All of a sudden, we're working with one. It was 18% that they were taking out. And then all of a sudden, the check started coming in, the statement. All of a sudden, there's another 2 or 3% taken off. And we had a lot of problems. They weren't handling our product right. We bailed out of there quick because it was not a good. And then now we're starting to get all of our complaints were coming from the product that they were handling. So you want to make sure you follow your product into the marketplace. Be transparent with your customers as far as the buyers in the stores. They like that. They were actually, when I came in, I said, I'm the cheese maker, the delivery guy, and the janitor. They think that's great. So they know they can put a face with a product, and they in turn, a lot of them, if they're excited about it, they're going to tell their customers, hey, I know the cheese maker. I've been to this farm. The other thing we do is every summer we take 2 days and we invite all of our customers to come to our farm, tour. And when I talk customers, I'm talking about our cheese buyers, any of the store managers, grocery store owners, come and be very transparent with them. Tour the farm. And one actually talked about bringing his entire staff down. He wanted them to all have the experience of milking a cow because all of his staff in their deli department had never milked a cow or been on a farm before. So that's just some things. Even look at maybe a dairy product that's maybe hasn't been around for 30, 40, 50 years. Sometimes these cycles, that might be a great way to bring something back too. They talk about goat milk as far as goat cheese, sheep milk, cow's milk. One of the things we started doing this, and all of a sudden started getting information from this company in Spain. They must have thought we were like right up there on the bar with Kraft and Saputo or something. But one thing that was interesting in that catalog is in Spain, they were doing some mixed milk cheeses as far as they were actually doing a 3 milk cheese, a sheep a goat and a cow's milk cheese. So there's always, I mean, you can really start to think out of the box on some of this stuff. One of the things that was an eye opener for us, it hasn't been talked about in our dairy industry, as I started touring these farms is, and it comes back to this grass-fed thing, the organic thing, but everybody that I stopped at, they said, just be careful of what you feed your cows. It affects the flavor of milk. We don't hear that. We go and we produce, we can buy whatever cheap commodities we can, but that was another thing. So I heard one time somebody said, yeah, my organic milk tastes so much better, or it's so different from the regular milk because it doesn't have antibiotics in it like the rest of it was. And I had to say, whoa, no, wait a minute. It's not, the other stuff's antibiotic free. It's just that the organic producers probably have a whole different diet, a lot more grass, and that's why you see a different flavor profile. So once you get a flavor profile going, you're going to have to be kind of careful as to what you don't change that, or you watch that, make sure you got consistency going. You're gonna have to take time. I mean, like I said, we're just going on our 5th year, and we're starting to feel, I don't know if it feel comfortable or not, but we feel like we're starting to get to that point where I know some people used to say a restaurant wasn't considered successful until they had been in business for 7 years. So maybe we're starting to get to that point where we're starting to feel things really fall into place. Yeah, I guess I try to make it really short so you can ask questions then.
Thank you, Jeff. Give a round of applause. So I've got 5 questions, but we'll let the audience ask them first. But as these two, as Kathy and Deanne are coming back up here, I think one thing that all 3 of them had said, and I know we would say, one thing we want to do is be extremely helpful, and hopefully, as we create a sense of community here, one bad apple, which there are a few, which Jeff mentioned, can ruin it for all of us. And so we do want to be helpful, and we are going to be careful, but we do want to make sure you do things right, because if people hear poor things about artisan, farmstead, local products, it can ruin it for all of us. So what questions do we have for the panelists? Meg?
You all mentioned food safety and the paramount importance of food safety, and that makes me think about liability, and that makes me think about insurance. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what kind of liability insurance you carry, and that is expensive, to talk about that in practical use.
Yeah, you only get sued for what your policy is. Okay, so basically, like, we'll have a $2 million policy, and we go through this, and we kind of check with the insurance industry has standards for it. There's enough people doing what we're doing now, and risk factors, so you go through that. But basically, you talk to any attorney, and they say, well, they're going to just look at your policy and whatever you've got on there. That's what you get sued for. I think our budget. My wife does the accounting, but I believe it's a little over $2,000 a year for the insurance on our food safety portion of our insurance and everything. So it's, yeah. Well, that's, yeah.
No, we're going through that right now. We have insurance, but now that we're getting ready to build a plant, we're doing that right now. And same thing. We have a $2 million, and then we're getting an umbrella policy too to additional cover.
Yeah, and for the recording, the question, of course, was about insurance policies you need. And I think I would say having the farm and a prior business probably helps as well. And I don't know about you, Jeff, but I can say you can kind of umbrella it all, which helps a little bit. Other questions, Jen? How much milk are you currently using? And for Jeff? And what percentage of that is from your farm, or what percent of your farm milk is that?
The percent of milk we're using right now is about 10-15% this time of year. So one thing I didn't bring up is the cycles in the food industry. This is crash and burn time. So in the cheese industry, November, December is your big time holiday season. And then we're up to 25-30% at that time. And it depends on what you're making. If you can do a diversified product line, you might be able to do more than that. But you have to understand the cycles. That was an eye-opener for us too. And that whatever product you're making, you have to look at what the cycles are of that product and be prepared for that too.
Yeah.
Making cheese is a 10-to-1. For the cheese making, it's a 10-to-1 process. 10 pounds of milk for every pound of cheese. So that's a good starting point for you.
Yeah, we at the U of M we can only rent that space once a month. We make about we use about 6,000 to 7,000 pounds of milk each make, and like Jeff said, the market goes up and down. But we do some aged cheeses, some aged flavored cheddars, and aged goudas. So we front load those in the winter, spring, when not as much fresh cheese is being used. So we plan our makes around the market.
All right, I've got some questions. Money, capital. What are you willing to share? What you're willing to share and comfortable with? Capital. What's it costs? Big surprises. Advice that you're willing to share with people here. And if you're not, of course, I'll give all my numbers. But anyway.
As far as capital investment goes, as I said, we were sitting down and had a family meeting. We looked at we were maybe going to add 150 cows instead of doing this. It would have been a wash if we would have added the freestall barn, manure storage. We would have it'd been about the same dollar. At that time, we budgeted a little over $500,000. I don't know what it would cost today. Everything stainless is going up, concrete, all that other. So I don't know if you add 30% onto that. You definitely want to build your building so you can grow. But the bigger you build it and the more empty space you have, of course, then that's overhead you're paying on. But so I guess that's what I can share with everybody.
Ours is a little more interesting because we're not building on a farm. We're 3 women. So finding that equity, we're actually working multiple loans at once right now. Our building will cost about $350,000 just to build ish, a little more. But we found that building brand new and renovating a space costs about the same amount.
Actually, it's going to cost more to demolish and readjust everything in a building than it would be to build a new facility. And with a new facility, especially making dairy products, you have to know what's in those walls because you don't want something coming out down the road. And so we just decided that was for safety's sake and for getting our own plan made, our own plant, the way we want it, we decided to build our own. And I just wanted to let you know that farmstead businesses, there are a lot heavier grants out there for farmstead businesses, so please look into those.
Yeah, we don't qualify for USDA value added because we don't own any cows, but we do qualify for Minnesota.
We thought about just buying a couple cows.
But that doesn't work either. But you also need a lot more operating loan money than you think you do. Jim Gage pounded that into our heads, so we're going to be asking for I don't know, what is it, about $100,000 working capital because it's going to take a while to get the money back from the aged cheese. So you need to make sure you have enough money front loaded to get you through the first 6 months to a year.
Remember to plan on employees if there are employees that you'll need, and workman's compensation and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, good point. Workman's comp was something we encountered we just passed the threshold on our farm as we expanded the cheese plant. So good point. Something we didn't have to deal with before. And I guess, so we said 350,000, about $500,000. We were 750,000, but that's with a commercial kitchen and retail store. So very similar, but 3 different levels. Yes. Oh, don't say that. Any other questions out here? What is the stupidest thing you've done?
The stupidest thing we've done. Believing we could do it within a month. And being upset that it's now 7 years later.
It just takes time. And the really important thing is to pull in the people who will help you do it right. Pull in those university people or the State Department of Health or the agriculture people from the State Department. Bring them in. Don't be afraid to use them.
And practice, practice, practice. You'll make some really bad batches, but you'll learn from that.
What time do you want to start lunch?
You guys want them to be quiet? Or
No. I don't know. I wasn't really the dumbest thing, but I've made a lot of mistakes, or we've tried things. One, and the prime one that sticks out is I thought you can make something good out of something bad. We did have a bulk tank that had compressor issues. The milk was borderline. I thought, we're okay. We're going to just turn this into a string cheese. We started eating that string cheese after it got made, and it was not good. So I had to dump that. So, I mean, you're going to have to make sure you don't cut any corners and the quality is right there. You understand now why the field man comes out and says, hey, there's an issue with bacteria or anything like that in these places. So you want to be careful of that. I did have a block of cheese one time I made. We do what we call our apple pie. I got a little overboard when you're doing test batches on the cinnamon, and it didn't knit together. So if I can imagine, I took a 40-pound block out, put it on our table to cut it, and it all went all over the place. So that was you have a lot of those learning moments. Trying to think what else. It's about, yeah, there's a lot of them, but like they said, I guess the one thing I've felt good about is I've had a lot of people. We've got a person who's retired from River Falls helping us. All the economic development people have been helping us with our business planning, things like that. The state people all have been really good about helping us. So yeah, when we first started, it's kind of like I've had the mentality that I'm gonna have to work at failing a lot harder than work at succeeding. And I don't know if you've found that too, but like I said, you need to find somebody. I know we're throwing this name Jim Gage out there. I talk to him once in a while. His phone rings off the hook every day because everybody's trying to figure this out. But there's more people out there, I'm sure, like him. So like I said, you really got to source somebody like him to help you. And you're going to have to go through some tough love because like I said, you need somebody like that to point blank tell you this is really a dumb idea. What you're looking at, you need to shift it over to this direction. So.
And we don't use Jim Gage as much anymore right now, but he was a great person to get us started, to just get us started on the right track, and then you kind of find your way with using other people.
Yeah, and we use Jim too. And I'll just say our stupidest thing was taking the cheapest plumbing bid. And anyway, we'll just stop there. Yeah. Question here. Yes.
One thing I forgot to mention when I introduced myself is I do the value-added equipment grant, but the department also offers the value-added feasibility study grants. And that is a 50-50 match up to $35,000. And what we do is you submit kind of a letter of interest with the shape of an idea, and then we connect you, once it kind of goes through our approval system, connect you with AURI to connect you with the consultant. So sort of setting up that relationship. So we tell people maybe if you have the resources to make that direct connection, great, but otherwise we can kind of help you in that first step. And really it's like 50% upfront for that feasibility study, and then 50% in the back end when it's done. Not necessarily that it's a good feasibility study or it's a good option. We don't say, oh no, then you're not going to get your money. It's just making you that connection and doing that feasibility study if that's something that you want to do. And that's relatively new, and we've had probably, I would say, less than 30 of them done. So we're still learning the ropes on that one, but that's just another thing that we offer.
We'll take one more from Lolly, and then we better go to lunch. But I just want to say, please meet somebody new during lunch. That's probably one of the most important things you can do there. I know one of the reasons we were able to convince these three to come and use their valuable time here is because they thought they would learn something, and that's probably true if they talk to one of you. So find a new friend. But we'll take one more question, and then we'll break for lunch. Do you have a market for the byproduct or waste stream? For the whey or whatever else is coming out of your plant besides what you're primarily selling?
It's a good question because whey will kill the septic system in Cannon Falls. All the good bacteria, cultures, and cheese will overtake the septic cultures. So we are actually going to be selling it back to Square Deal Dairy. They're going to feed it back to their calves, and it'll just help with that to the cows. It'll help with that nutrition. There's a lot of hog farms out there that love to take it. A lot of cheese producers are now starting hog farms to feed whey to them, and so they're doing pigs too. But as Jim told us, whey is a commodity. Do not throw it away. But otherwise, you'd have to put it in a holding pond and other things. I don't know what you do.
We started out with hauling it back out in the field. Our county allowed us to do that. However, we had it in plan that we have a whey pump, so we pump it in storage tanks and it gets fed back to the cows. And it was amazing. Customer perception. They'd come, say, by the way, that question be asked, what do you do with your whey? Excuse me. And I'd say, well, right now it goes in the septic. We're hauling it back on the field, spraying it on the field. Oh, then they ask, somebody else would ask later on, once we got the whey pump going and everything, holding tanks, what do you do with your whey? Oh, we feed it back to the cows. Their eyes light up. Oh, that is so green. Great. So, and it's a wash almost. I mean, it has a lot of value, but it was between handling it and stuff like that, or we were looking at making another product with it, a lot more costs and money, but never never rule that out. I mean, there's milk plants that are actually taking away and extracting it clear down to water, and they're washing their plants down with it again. So, yeah, it's definitely something to look at. I got a nephew that is making yogurt, takes the whey, he adds Kool-Aid mix back to it, and he uses that as his energy drink when he goes bike riding. So, he's in an oven, church oven.
There is a business opportunity for that. If you want to go around to all of us artisan cheese producers, if you can collect a whole tanker truck full of whey, then candy companies, ice cream companies, those people want it. But we don't make enough whey for those companies, so hey.
Yeah, and I think we'll end there. So just a final note on that. Think about where all the products are going to leave your operation. I think that's really, really important. The stuff you're selling, the people, the byproducts, and everything else. We'll break for lunch, and we'll meet back at 1 sharp. I don't have my thing in front of me. 1:05. So thank you very much, and let's give these guys one more round of applause.